Penn State, Boise State in the VRBO Fiesta Bowl going down, as I said, New Year's Eve, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, that is, out in Glendale, Arizona. This line has moved just a hair. We had it at the graphic on your screen here was more closer to the original number that opened up. It looks like it's ticked way of Penn State to 11 and a half. The over under was at 52 and a half. It looks like it's up to 53 and a half most spots that I'm looking at now. So you've got movement headed Penn State's way. The line's moving up in this one. I find that pretty interesting considering the styles that we discussed last week that are going to be clashing in this game, Mason. It's two really good running games, two teams that have their offenses 100% based on that running game being productive. And you've got two offenses facing off that are looking to hit some explosive plays and back that defense up just a bit. Um, Big spread here, man. I mean, this is a big spread, almost the biggest spread in this quarterfinals. You've got obviously Texas, Arizona State, and Mason. That game started at 14. People are betting on Arizona State in that one, so we're going to talk about that one here in just a few minutes. If you missed our first videos on these games, I encourage you to go back and check those out. We had kind of given our initial thoughts on those things, but we're going to give our official predictions today. Um, as I said, Mason, I think this game comes down to Camper for Boise State, and I think it comes down to Warren for Penn State. Those are a couple of guys that are X factors to me in this game. Both of them for each team have got to figure out a way to hit explosive plays. Tyler Warren has been used every way imaginable that you could use an offensive weapon. He's ran the football. He's lined up at quarterback. He's lined up all over the offensive line. He's lined up at wide receiver. He's done it all, man. But what can you do in this game? What wrinkle can you install with the 10 days that you had after beating SMU to utilize him in the best way possible? I think that's really, really important. And then you got a team like Boise State who we just talked about it. The offensive identity has been toting the rock. Obviously, Ashton Genty has had a very historic season. And I think that we're going to see that continue. We haven't seen this guy get really slowed down a whole heck of a lot this year. I would that he's going to do his thing. What can the team do around him? I think is the biggest question. Maddox Madsen going to have to hit a couple of throws like he did in that UNLV game to be able to get Boise State over the top in this one. What are your thoughts, Mason? This is a game that, at least on our channel, has been the game that's been talked about the least. Right? This video that we did last week. It's generated the least amount of traffic, and I think that this is a super interesting matchup and one that we're going to be super excited to talk about on New Year's Eve, and we're going to give our predictions here in a minute. But what do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, at first glance, you see a 10.5 point spread. Vegas is telling you this is a two-score game in favor of Penn State, and I just don't, I don't know if I see that. I think it's either going to be Penn State wins by 3 scores, or um, it's going to be a nail biter that could go Boise State's way. I think Boise State absolutely has an opportunity to win this football game if they're able to gash the defense of Penn State, which is a tall order. I think Tom Allen does a great job on that side of the football. But we've seen some success in the running game, a la Bowling Green. I know that was seems like ages ago in the college
Yeah.
football season, but we saw Bowling Green have a lot of success running the football against this Penn State defense when they were healthy, right? I understand that Dennis Sutton wasn't around for the majority of this season, but he is back. If I remember correctly, he was playing in that game against Bowling Green, and they still were able to go for a ton of yards on the ground. Point being, and also I'll reference Minnesota. That was probably a lackluster offense in some ways, not an elite offense, a good offense, especially by their standards. But we saw the Minnesota offense have some success against Penn State and take them down to the wire as well. And that's a more recent data point that we can point to and say, yeah, this Penn State defense, they're good, but they've got flaws. Not to mention Oregon basically score at every drive that they played. in the Big Ten championship game. So I think that Boise State could have some success running the football. My concern is Maddox Madsen and his willingness to pass the football and throw it into some tight windows, right? Sometimes that can be a detriment. You don't I don't want to see him just play completely vanilla and only take conservative throws, just a lot of screen passes and whatnot. You're gonna have to take some chances if you're Boise State in this football game because you're outmanned and you're outmatched physically when it comes to talent, right? In a lot of these matchups, other than Ashton Genty and and Camper, I think on the edge, like you said, he's got an opportunity here to make some plays, going up against a defensive backfield that is susceptible. I think that Penn State is probably better in the front seven than they are on the back end of that defense. So if you are going to have some success, maybe challenging the back end of the defense and getting some chunk yardage, maybe that's the way to go. But Maddox Madsen, he can, man, if he's on point, he can actually slice this defense up, I think. However, I've seen too many examples. I don't know that he's necessarily been consistent as far as, playing at the level that he's capable of, playing at his ceiling. I think we've seen him play more towards, I guess, obviously his average, but his average is not good enough to win this football game, in my opinion. We're going to have to see him play at his ceiling, making some really decisive throws that fit inside the window. We saw against UNLV in the championship game. I mean, he threw, I think, one pick, maybe two, but could have had four easily. I mean, some defenders dropped the football and, cost them a turnover in that game. I'm anxious to see if he's going to play conservative or if he's going to go out with that same mentality, be a gunslinger, and actually connect on those footballs, on those throws. And if he does that, Boise State could definitely have some success. On the defensive side of the football for Boise State, I'm anxious to see what they do against the passing attack of Penn State. I feel pretty confident that Boise is going to be able to slow the run game down. I know Penn State likes to run the football. They're not going to have really a running quarterback in this game. Bo Pribula is not going to play. He is transferring out, and I'm not sure about the backup for them, but I don't think that he's going to get a ton of snaps, right? Where we used to see the red zone package, Pribula would come out from time to time, run the football a little bit, and give the defense something else to look at and think about. I think we're going to see Drew Aller for probably 100% of this game, barring injury, obviously. But if that's the case, do things get tight in the red zone? And if so, does Penn State lean on the run game and end up kicking a lot of field goals because they're not able to handle it, to handle this front seven for Boise State? I think that could very much be the case, and that's the recipe for Boise State to win this football game. And as I'm saying this, I kind of hear myself talking, and it sounds like I'm leaning towards Boise State winning. I'm kind of playing the contrarian card here because obviously everybody's picking Penn State. Vegas is picking Penn State to win by two scores, and I'm trying to give you guys a possibility for Boise State to win this football game. This is the road to success, right? Limit the scores when you get down to the red zone. Force Penn State to kick field goals. Obviously, turnovers are going to help, but you can't really predict the turnovers here. And limit the offense to 3 points, not seven, right? If you're able to do that, hit a few chunk plays. You're not going to score on every drive. I don't believe this offense is capable of scoring every time they touch the football. However, can you get seven instead of three and limit the possessions for Penn State by running the football? I think if you get into a rock fight, I think that bodes well for Boise State, and that's a path for them to win this football game. That's kind of how I see it unfolding, though. If it's going to go Boise State's way, that's the recipe for success. Penn State can win a lot of different ways, right? They really can. They have the dudes. They could win it through the air. If they get the run game going, I don't think they will. They could win it that way as well. Tyler Warren can just take the football game over at times. But ultimately, I wanted to kind of give you guys an idea of how Boise State wins this football game, and that's how I see it breaking down, Mark. If it's going to go that way.
Well, I think you make some good points, and so I'll kind of back up to where you were talking about Maddox Madsen, and I'll include Drew Aller in this conversation as well, because I think all the things that I'm about to say apply to him just as much as they do to Maddox Madsen. Um, I think it really depends on how these defenses come out and line up, and that's what I'm most games. That's the first thing that I'm most interested in seeing, and that's usually the first thing that I look at. Does Penn State feel as though they can come out here and do more with less defensively? And what I mean by that is, are they able to line up and only bring three or four and be able to control this run game a bit? Now, Ashton Genty's an absolute load, and it typically takes more than one guy to get him down. So I'm going to venture to say no. I'm thinking that Penn State is going to be packing guys on the line, and I think they're going to be trying to bring pressure, and they're going to be trying to conceal those edges, and keep Genty in between the tackles the best they can. Um, so with that being said, I think that really opens some things up for Maddox Madsen. I think you're going to see some one-on-ones with these wide receivers, Camper included
Yeah.
in that. And with that being said, I like Maddox Madsen's chances a lot better. Now, we'll see how honest they can keep that defense and how close they can keep them to the defensive line. If Maddox Madsen starts to hit some passes, then I think the run game opens up. We all know how this works. The run game feeds the pass game feeds the run game. So that that's kind of how I see it playing out. I think Penn State comes out aggressive early, and we'll see if Maddox Madsen is able to take the blitz and get the football down the field, or if he's got time to do it. I think the offensive line for Boise State is pretty good. This will be a test for him, especially on those edges with those edge rushers, Abdul Carter, Dennis Sutton on the other side. I mean, those are absolutely phenomenal edge rushers. So that's easier said than done. Now flip over to the Penn State side. How's Boise State going to play this? Because every time I've watched Boise State this season, Mason, I've been very impressed with their defensive line. And can they bring four and dampen the run game and drop enough guys back to be able to confuse Drew Aller? I think there's a better chance that Boise State is able to do that than Penn State is able to do that in this game. And I think that's solely due to the fact that Ashton Genty is on one side of this equation here. That's really what I'm basing that off of, because I'm a firm believer in the fact that Ashton Genty, if not I think he's the best running back in the country right now for sure. He's one of the best players in the country overall, no doubt. It's going to take more than one player to tackle him. You can't. You've got to gang tackle him. It's going to take a lot of team speed and a lot of getting to the football. Um, I think Boise has a better chance of being able to do more with less defensively, drop more guys back in coverage. And we talked about it earlier this week. My thoughts were whoever wins the turnover battle here, and it's such a cliche in football, but I think it really matters here. Which one of these quarterbacks is going to make mistakes? Drew Aller, the more you ask him to do in this offense, the more he's turned the ball over. That goes for just about every player, but Drew Aller's not exempt from that. So, which one's making mistakes? I think that is going to tell us a lot about who's going to win this football game. Um, I like Boise State to cover this spread. I am going to put some money on it. I'm going to keep waiting because the line is moving by in the way of Penn State here. So I'm going to wait to bet a little bit closer to game time because I think it's going to keep going. Like you said, everybody's on Penn State here. And the more the number goes up as far as the over under goes, the more I'm interested in the under itself. We talked about it and you mentioned it just now. I think there's a possibility that there's a lot of field goals in the game. And with that being said, I think that tilts to the under as the over under is ticking up. Fade the public. It's not something that we made up here on the First and Long College Football Show. It's what real bettors are thinking all the time, right? Fade the public. And I think that it applies here. So give me Boise State plus the points. I this game's going to be one possession, Mason, and it's really going to come down to the turnover over battle, and probably something on special teams as well. Give me Boise State here, man. I'm gonna take Boise State to win this sucker in a really really close game in a very very interesting football game. I like what I've seen from Boise State on the lines of scrimmage. I know they've been bad about the defending the pass this year. I know that at every position they don't line up and match up with Penn State perfectly, but I think Boise State is on the right side of this thing. I think they've got one of the best players in the country, and I think that he helps propel this team to the next round here. Give me Boise State over Penn State in this one. What do you think? What's your final
Well,
thoughts?
I think that the safe bet here is to take Penn State and take the points. To me, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, but there are more ways for Penn State to win this football game than there are Boise State, and that's just because of a talent advantage and the talent gap between Penn State and Boise State. However, if I'm saying Penn State wins this game and covers 7 out of 10 times, and you're giving me a 30% chance of Boise State not only covering but winning the football game as well, I'll take that. Like 300 is a great batting average in baseball, right? So if I got a 300 hitter at the plate with the game on the line, I feel pretty good about my chances there. And so, it's kind of a bad analogy. I know we're talking about football here, but I like Boise State. I like the matchups in this game for them. I do think that there is a couple of ways that they win this football game. And to me, I don't see this being a very clean game. So if Boise State can be the benefactor of a couple of turnovers, that's really going to help them a lot. I do think that they will need to win the turnover battle to win this football game. So I am kind of betting on that as well. But give me Boise State to not only cover but win this football game. I'm with you, Mark. I'm kind of surprised you're taking Boise State. I know a lot of people are on Penn State this week, especially after we saw a ton of blowouts in the first round, and the favorites winning by a large margin in the first round for all four of those games. I know a lot of people are going to be thinking that Boise State is one of those teams as well, but um, let's remind folks this is a team that almost beat Oregon. If it weren't for two special team scores, touchdowns, a 14-point swing on special teams, we're talking about an undefeated Boise State team that beat the number one team in the country. Obviously, they wouldn't be had they lost that game, but that's the type of team we're talking about here, and I think I think that Boise State might be able to pull this one off.